Meal prep is something everyone with a great physique does and something people without great physiques don't do. It is one of the key habits that will make you see faster results while saving you tons of time, money, stress, and effort. But only if you do it in a way that works best for you. Otherwise, it adds time, effort, stress, and it won't help you see the results you're after in the process. This is what most people think it does and is why they don't do it. Now, I've been meal prepping for over a decade and I've helped thousands of others pick up this habit as well. So I'm going to break down exactly how to incorporate it and how to think about it. Once you do, you'll be able to take your results to the next level. So let's get to it. Now, before diving into the process, it's important to understand that meal prep is indeed non-negotiable if you want to see your best results. I'll always remember the fateful conversation I had 12 years ago with a natural physique competitor at my gym who had an absolutely insane physique. Now, I was just a degenerate 17-year-old who happened to love lifting. I asked him one day, I said, bro, if you had to pinpoint one thing that made the biggest difference in your physique since you've started, what would you say it is? He thought for about 5 seconds and he said, honestly, I'd say when I went from eating clean 5 days a week to 7 days a week, my results really went to the next level. Now, here I was hoping for some magical formula or secret that nobody ever talks about. And that's what bro came up with. What a waste of time. That's obviously not what got him to such an insane physique. And this is the sort of mindset you have when you're a 17-year-old and you have no understanding of how the world works yet. That said, I would realize about 5 years later that that was actually the secret. You see, the level of consistency needed between okay results and insane results is so much more than the average person can fathom. So much so that they will be repelled by it, thinking that's no way to live and that's too robotic. But the truth is, it's not about eating exactly the same thing every single day and that the meals all have to be bland and boring. But what it does mean is that you need to be nailing your calorie and macro targets as consistently as possible, 6 to 7 days a week for extremely long periods of time if you want the best results. And it's actually very difficult to do that if you aren't prepared ahead of time. In fact, even to this day, you took me, somebody who's been doing this over 10 years, and you took away all of my prep, most of the food away from my fridge, and gave me a week to hit the targets consistently that I needed to. I would be able to, but it would cost way more money, it would cost a ton of decision fatigue, and I still wouldn't nail my macros nearly as well as I do on most days of the week currently. So if an experienced lifter will struggle with this, what makes you think you stand a fucking chance? But because I prep at least 100 grams of protein per day ahead of time, some good carbs, and eat similar meals most days of the week, I effortlessly hit my macros day in and day out without a second thought about it, and I can just focus on other things while I get as lean or as jagged as I want. Not to mention I've coached so many clients over the last 10 years, and the pattern is obvious. Those who see insane results in a short period of time are the ones who understand that eating similar foods most days of the week is the easiest way to do that. So if you're a foodie who needs fresh meals cooked every single day, there are workarounds for you, which we can discuss, but you'll probably be running an uphill battle. So meal prep is non-negotiable to reach the level of consistency required for incredible results. We understand? Good. Now we can walk through the actual process. People still think that they need to be told what meals to prepare or eat or how to prepare them, but meal prep doesn't really work like that. Here's how to go about it the right way. First, identify what protein, carbs, fats, and veggies you want to eat. Determine how much to eat for each day, how many times a day, and just cook up multiple days worth of fat. All of the intricate details are something that is individual to you. Oh, you'll also want either some big containers to store the foods you cook in bulk, or what I recommend most, individual meal prep containers. Now, I usually use glass containers as they're much easier to clean and they're probably safer to use over time, but that's all up to you. Now, let's walk through the process step by step. Step 1, plan your meals. This should take 10 minutes or less. Before you can meal prep effectively, you should have an idea as to what your calorie and macro targets are at the moment. Now, I'm not going to cover that here, but check out the videos I have on the channel that do help cover that if you haven't determined yours yet. From those calories and macros, you should break down into how many meals a day are you good with eating. Once you've identified generally how many meals a day you'll aim for, which for most would probably be somewhere between 3 and 4 a day, it's time to plan out what a standard day of hitting your calories and macro targets looks like. This will take 5 to 10 minutes at most, but you only have to do this once, and you can get into a routine of eating that works for your goals, and of course it can evolve over time. Creating the sort of skeleton of your daily nutrition this way is super helpful. Adjust portions of each carb, protein, or fat source until you're able to line up each meal in a balanced way that totals the macros you're trying to hit at the end of the day. From there, you can now determine how many of these meals do you want to prepare. Perhaps there's only one that really gives you trouble that would be best prepared ahead of time, maybe two, or maybe you say, no, I need to prep everything at once. Either way, I recommend starting small and working your way up over time so you don't overwhelm yourself with something that takes you several hours and looks all fancy for a TikTok video or some shit. Start by identifying the most time-consuming or troublesome meal of the day for you. For example, breakfast and pre-workout meals for me take almost no cooking time, so I just whip them up together the day of and it's fine. But for my last 2 meals of the day, I need cooked protein in them, so that's currently what I prep ahead of time. I'm going to walk through my own personal system and how it's evolved over the years to give you a better idea later if you feel you need it. Now for you, you might always sort of fuck up your first meal and you need to prepare that. Cool, start with the first meal and just prepping your breakfasts for every day this coming week. Start small, start simple, and you'll feel the power of it. Step 2 is go and buy the food. This is maybe 30 minutes. Once you've now identified and build your basic meal plan template, you've done the most complex part of this whole prep. Now it's time to just make a basic list of the things you need to get at the grocery store. Go and buy them. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, but it's the internet, so I'm going to anyways. Most of these meals should be nutrient-dense foods, right? Whole, healthy foods. I gotta be honest, when you see the average person's shopping cart at the grocery store, I don't know about you, but I'm wondering what exactly propels someone to take home such an abominable grouping of garbage hardly even made for human consumption. Nonetheless, once you finish looking through the peasant carts for a good laugh, you now have the food, time to go home. Step 3 is cook the food and distribute it. Well, this step is as straightforward as it gets. Batch cook the foods you bought, which would likely be a protein source or two, a carb source or two, and maybe some veggies. Once cooked, distribute the foods into your meal prep containers so that they add up to the portions you already previously determined. Now, the bonus of this is also the fact that it makes tracking your food so much easier on a day-to-day basis. Cooking from home gives you better control over the calories and macros instead of leaving it up to some meal prep companies or other restaurants, food places that very well may be off with their nutritional claims by a lot. Now, you should have at least one meal of every day prepped and ready to go, stored appropriately, which will mean fridge or freezer. Depending on the meal and how much you like it, you could even prepare some of these multiple weeks ahead of time and store them in the freezer just to save you more time and effort. Just start with a few days for maybe up to a week for now. Some people don't like 3-day-old food, but to me, a meal cooked 2 weeks ago that was sitting in the freezer, after it's warmed up, tastes like it was just cooked. Big fucking deal. So that's really a preference thing. And there you go. You have now just meal prepped effectively. Now, there may be several questions you have about this process at some point, so I'm going to cover some of the nuances to keep in mind about all of this. Now, the first thing to understand is that there are no actual rules to meal prep. It's the people that think that meal prep looks a certain way or has to be done a certain way that struggle to build this habit. My meal prep has been as complex as cooking up every meal the morning of, to cooking every 2 to 3 days at a time, to cooking and prepping only one meal 4 weeks ahead of time, to only cooking 100 grams of protein for every day of the week 2 weeks ahead of time. It could be as complex or as simple and as bland or not bland as you need or want it to be, and it will evolve over time. That said, here are some common questions I get surrounding prep and how to best go about it, as well as common mistakes people make or fallacies around prep that people fall for. Question 1, what are the best foods to prep for my goal? Well, as we went through the first step of the meal planning process, you'll now have to determine that for yourself. Putting a meal plan together is so easy. You don't have to be a rocket science. You don't have to have a nutritionist degree to do it. In fact, nutritionists make some of the most garbage meal plans of all time because they overcomplicate it. You determine the foods and meals that work best for your preferences, macros, and meal frequency. Keep in mind, this isn't set in stone. You might try the meal prep that you make for the next week or a few days, and you might not like it much at all. You'll get better at cooking and preparing the foods you decide on. Believe me, first time I prepped chicken, it tasted like absolute cardboard. Guess what? I'm now a master at prepping chicken for taste and efficiency. You'll get better at this as things evolve. Question 2, how many days should I prepare ahead of time? That's really up to you. I would aim to prepare a full week ahead of time. The reason is because most people that prepare, let's say only a couple days out, by the time the middle of the week rolls around and they don't have time to prepare again, they struggle to hit their targets the rest of the week. Better yet, just prep for the amount of days you feel you need to. Maybe you only really have 3 hectic days of the week and 3 chill days. No worries. On the chill days, you can be more flexible or cook at home. Have prep ready for the other 3 days. Question 3, I don't want to prepare because I hate bland, boring food and eating the exact same thing every day. Crazy idea. Prep alternate meals for each day. Crazy idea. Cook with spices and flavorings that taste good. Crazy idea. Only prep the meals you don't have time to cook the day of and enjoy whatever else for those other meals of the day. For example, I have 2 meals a day currently that I prep chicken breast for specifically, but guess what? Everything else of the day is up for grabs. Now, it's usually the same things, but I may change portions. I may sub in one meal depending on how I'm feeling and scheduling. I may make a permanent swap for my breakfast suddenly. Your diet is ever changing and can be as free and flexible as you want it to be. Meal prep doesn't have to make everything bland. It saves time for those days and meals that you would end up probably eating some random shit because you didn't have time or couldn't decide what to eat. Since you're tracking your calories and macros and other data, you will now have more freedom and flexibility to eat the foods you want and have different meals at some point each week. Strict diets you follow like a robot is not the way. Who really wants to live that way anyways? But at the same time, eating something fresh and gourmet and new every single day is somewhat childish and chaotic unless you have zero physique-related goals, in which case, why are you still watching this video? Question 4, how should I store my meals for better taste? This depends on how cold your fridge is and the food you cooked up personally. When it comes to chicken the way I cook it, or trout, turkey, etc., and carbs like potatoes or rice, I'm able to store it in a fridge that's 1 degree Celsius for up to 8 or 9 days without it going bad. I've also frozen batches of food that I plan on eating further out than this, and heating it up longer in the microwave has never led to it tasting different for me. Same thing with the carb sources. Vegetables, I don't prep ahead of time anymore. I just buy frozen veggies and I heat them up with the protein or carb. So it's really up to you, the way you cook the food and the food itself. But to be safe, I probably wouldn't leave anything in the fridge for more than 7 days. And definitely don't leave your meal prep outside of a fridge or freezer for days at a time. I remember seeing something about some kid who would leave his meal prep out instead of storing it in the fridge for days, and he ended up dying due to actual food poisoning that came from it. So fridge or freezer. Question 5, are there any hacks that I have to speed up the process? Yes, there are. Keep in mind, in the world we live in, you have to make a trade-off for speed and convenience, and that is higher cost, sometimes lower quality. What I've done over the last year is I went the ultra lazy route. I would buy pre-cooked rice packs and only prep my chicken itself. In fact, I eventually ended up buying pre-cooked chicken too, and I went a couple of months without prep at all. The benefit? Saved some more time and was able to get super lazy about it, still hit targets. The downside, I started noticing my grocery bill was racking up and the chicken itself tasted of very low quality, and it eventually got to me. The price of convenience is quality and more money. I personally think it's worth it, since the food is such a big part of this lifestyle, to just take the time to prep at least some portion of your weekly nutrition. The quality and acquisition of the skill is definitely worth it. Plus, the savings can add up to quite a bit over time. Now, that said, a big mistake people make is thinking meal prep needs to look super fancy or have complex recipes. This is the opposite of the truth, and that is just for the sake of gaining a ton of views, but not really helping anybody on social media. Meal prep is very basic if it's going to be as effective and streamlined as possible. Another thing I'll mention is the fact that if you're cooking things up, seek the fastest or easiest ways to cook them. I used to cook my meals, fish, chicken, all this on the skillet, which required constant monitoring. But now I toss everything in the oven. Takes more time maybe, but it doesn't need to be checked on. So I literally set it into the oven, put it in, set the timer, and do other things while it's cooking. Maximum efficiency. You can also purchase meals from a meal prep company. Now, this is the most costly option, but make sure it's from a reputable brand with accurate nutrition labels and quality ingredients. Question 6, is it safe to microwave reheat these foods? Yes. There's no concrete data to suggest otherwise. I've actually made a full video several years ago on how using a microwave regularly is safe, and I've only been using one to heat up my meals for over a decade with no issues whatsoever. Knock on wood. But I will reiterate my point from earlier in that using glass containers is probably worth the peace of mind there. And the food does seem to taste better out of glass. Maybe that's just placebo from all the social media health fear-mongering these days that has subconsciously penetrated my brain, but nonetheless, I still recommend it. Question 7, I don't have much time or my schedule changes often. How can I make meal prep fit my schedule and time constraints? Now, since we know that it doesn't have to have rules or be fancy, it doesn't have to take half a day to prepare, then it is very flexible and it can fit into any schedule or routine. So when it comes to prioritizing something in life, in this case your physique, nutrition, performance, etc., we have to literally prioritize certain things. So if you want to build a great physique, but you struggle to hit your training sessions, you have zero chance of accomplishing this goal because you're not even prioritizing a basic part of it. Every able human on this planet has 45 to 60 minutes to train a few days a week, and there are no exceptions. So does every able human have 1 to 2 extra hours a week that they can use to prepare ahead of time? Also yes. This is not so much a logistical question as much as it is a lazy and misprioritized question. Look at your calendar when you have 1 or 2 hours, even if you have to split it, by the way, to at least cook something ahead of time. Good, set it for then and stick to it. Eventually you'll find the time of day and the day itself that works best for you, and that day will probably become the designated meal prep day. Also, the better you get at this process and the more clearly you understand what to prep that makes the most sense for you, that saves time, and still gets the primary goals of meal prep achieved, you'll find that it becomes less and less of a nuisance, more of a standard ingrained weekly habit like doing the laundry is. Actually, I typically do meal prep and do the laundry at the same time. Question 8, what does my own meal prep look like currently? Right now, I'm prepping 1 to 2 weeks worth of chicken breast ahead of time in the oven for 60 minutes. I'm currently doing a batch cook of rice, which stays in a big container as my carbs, have been set to change depending on the day and the week, and since I was just cutting leading up to this. I add frozen veggie mixes and I heat it up in the microwave, and that's part of my post-workout meal. The last meal of my day, typically a big ass salad, is where I use the second container of chicken for the day that I prep ahead of time, and I don't prepare my first or second meals, as these are easily prepared the day of, as my schedule allows for it, and they're pretty simple meals. However, if I really wanted or needed to, my first meal with a yogurt bowl would be granola, frozen berries, and a protein bar mixed in. I could prep these in like parfait-like containers ahead of time if I needed to, and that would be super simple and save time. I just don't need to do that given I work from home anyways. Now, over the years, you'll see how I've eaten in vastly different ways. There are videos demonstrating my diet across the last 7 years on this channel, as well as videos walking through my prep process at each of those times. When I was working 60 hours a week at my first gym job 10 years ago, I was so busy and eating so much food, I was literally paying my mom to cook some of these basic meals each morning before I left for work. At one point, when I went unemployed after this short while, I cooked every meal fresh the day of. Then over the years, as I sought to become more efficient and life got busier and busier, my prep went 1 week ahead of time to eventually 2 weeks ahead of time, starting to freeze meals to save even more time. These days, I prep basically 1.5 to 2 weeks for about 90 minutes each, and it gets everything I need to nail my nutrition targets without even thinking about it. It helps that I can eat similar things almost every day, going back to the previous point. Now you have a better understanding as to how to go about meal prep to integrate it into your lifestyle. Either way, I'll walk you through an example if I was starting from scratch, how I would do this using my own nutrition setup. So I would first figure out my calories and macros. Let's say we'll use my current ones: 2,800 calories, 225 grams of protein, 56 grams of fat, and 350 grams of carbs. I'm gonna break these calories and macros up into 3 or 4 meals a day, depending on what I want. I work out right now at around 1 p.m., which is my favorite time, and so I decide I'm gonna have 2 meals before I hit the gym and 2 meals after. This means I'll need about 50 to 60 grams of protein in each meal to keep it balanced. I'll then evenly spread carbs and fats, however it makes the most sense based on the meals themselves. In the morning, I definitely want egg whites and whole eggs at some point, tons of easy protein there, and I want some Greek yogurt for another meal. In the evening, to make things simple, I'll just have meat for protein, say chicken breast and trout, since I like it. I use my FitnessPal and I plug in amounts of each of these for 4 meals until the protein is somewhat even. This doesn't have to be perfectly even either, and I now have a base of each meal. I'm gonna go ahead and select the carbs that I like that go with each of these meals. So for example, the Greek yogurt, I'll put frozen fruits and some granola to take care of some of the fats and a good amount of carbs. With the egg-based meal, I'm just gonna add some pieces of fruit for the carbs on the side of that, and the eggs already have some fat. For the post-workout meal, I'll do trout and pair it with potatoes or rice to finish off most of the carbs for the day. I could even split them between the next meal as well. I'm gonna throw some veggies into each meal, and cool, now I have a solid, repeatable, simple, and effective base of meals I'm gonna follow for the next little bit, making any tweaks as needed and filling in the gaps. For example, if I'm low on carbs and fat, I'll add some healthy toast and butter in to take care of that somewhere. Now, I determined that I have to prepare the first 2 meals of the day in the morning, but I don't want to cook after the gym when the day gets more hectic scheduling-wise, so I'll need to prepare the fish and chicken and rice ahead of time, and I'm going to use frozen veggies to add on to them. I'll go ahead and calculate how much raw fish and chicken I need to buy, and I'll go and buy a big bag of uncooked rice as well. I'll make sure I get the appropriate seasonings for both the chicken and fish, and I'll throw both of these in the oven for 1 hour or less and let them cook. In the meantime, I'll cook enough rice on the stove for 1 to 2 weeks worth of these meals. Maybe I'll get some potatoes and toss those in the oven as well, along with the proteins. Once it's done, I'm gonna go ahead and weigh the amount I need of each ingredient into separate containers. I'm gonna store 1 week's worth in the fridge, and I'm gonna store 1 week in the freezer. Once I'm done, which would be about 60 minutes total, 50 minutes of packaging, then I'll clean everything out for about 5 to 10 minutes. The day of, when it's time to eat the meal needed, I take it out, I add the veggies in, I heat it up as needed in the microwave, and I can also add some spice or sauce as long as there's room for it for the day. If a day comes where the schedule is thrown off or I'm not at the house, no big deal. I'll eat out that day, or I'll bring the meal with me if that makes more sense. Because now, instead of eating out or not knowing what to eat being the norm, being on point with my targets is the norm. So this way, eating out and doing something different from time to time makes it more of occasion. That makes it way more valuable, enjoyable, and it's a bonus. Boom, I've just saved time, money, made hitting my nutrition targets simple and seamless, and as a result, I've made building my best physique that much easier while everybody else struggles to do what they need to do. Remember, meal prep doesn't have to be complicated, it just needs to be effective for you. This is an integral habit for anybody that builds a great physique long term. After all, we're in this game for life and always seeking progress. So why not make it easier to both stay in the game and win while you're in it? For those of you who are committed to prep already or you're about to start now, I'll be seeing you at the top.